We're ready for the longer presentation on this topic of how do we address addiction issues in COVID. Why is COVID particularly a powerful mechanism to get people to address their addiction issues? And how is it you hold on to that commitment once you start? What we know about human beings is that every single thing human beings try to change. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to start studying better, et cetera, et cetera. What we know is that people have a really good start on that, and then most of the time it's sort of a diving down to the old patterns again. So not only how do we get one's attention about addiction issues, but how do you keep them committed to that very difficult process of recovery? I want to draw your attention to, in the description box down below, you'll find a link for a couple of ebooks relevant to this. Our ebook on the drquirk.net website is called Address Addictions, Diseases of Isolation, Heal Addiction, Restore Community. And this gets to the point about how addiction is a very isolating experience, and the connection to others in this manner is one of the big factors that makes people better. Additionally, another book you'll find that has some real relevance to this is the one that's titled Mental Health Issues, Loss of Peace and Joy Within Self. And this has some of the same kind of articles in it relevant to one's own recovery. So you're very welcome to go to the description box below and buy these through Amazon. Now, on to our point. So the lead-in I presented was the idea that COVID does seem to have been a real catalyst for change. And the place we want to start with on this is we talked last time about the two most amazing issues that I came to understand about my career field that I really never understood prior to being well immersed in my career field was, one, how much you can truly do to help people to heal the very deepest wounds within them and to evolve as beings and to become something much better than they were, much wiser, much stronger, and much more joyful, and much more able to really create the very most meaningful life that they can. I had no idea how much you can do for that. It is amazing how much the human psyche can heal. On the other hand, the very disappointing was to realize how much of the time I aspire to much more for people than they do for themselves. So often we human beings just want to not hurt so bad. Come into therapy, they're used to feeling about here, not great, but not terrible. But now they're down here, so they really just aspire, I just want to get back to where I was. I just want to not be as miserable as I was. When in fact what you recognize is that when you have the right kind of catalyst, this expression that most people know, necessity is the mother of invention. That's actually an Aristotle, is that Aristotle? No, Plato, excuse me, Plato quote. It is just incredibly true. This is really what pushes human beings to change, necessity. And necessity is born of discomfort. In fact, my master's thesis, I got a general master's in clinical psychology, but I did a specialty study in addictions, several classes, as well as my dissertation. And what this looked at was really variables that play into whether or not somebody's going to be able to commit to treatment and stay in their treatment. Not just did they go to get help, but did they stay with help and get the help they needed and really come out the other end. And what we found really pretty consistently was, one, how bad do they hurt? Are they losing marriage, family, etc.? I'm going to talk about all those kind of factors in a minute. What are you going to lose? And is that potential loss still something that stays with them over time, that they keep that awareness? That's a key variable in it. Because like I said, what we know is that if we could take the desperate craving we have for change and improved life that everybody experiences at certain moments in their life about whatever their issue is, in this case we'll talk about addictions. It isn't that addicted people haven't many times longed to feel better, they just can't hold on to that long enough. So what do we do with that? What COVID has done is basically it's just stuck you in a situation that you're in for a really long time. And you're kind of trapped in a very limited scope of experiences and you can't escape. And the pressure of the dysfunctional behavior gets to be more and more. And so, like I said, in some cases that's just basically that people become more and more miserable because they don't have the distractions from their addiction. They actually are doing the addiction more. Another one is because it's created a lot of tensions in their marriage. Another one is because it's made them less effective in their family in terms of managing their children and helping their children do well. Or it just amplifies the sense of loneliness that's always been going on in their lives. Whatever it is, it creates this much more intense experience, and although the long-lasting nature of COVID has been devastating for our country in many ways, it really is a very good thing for people to change because it's not going away. It's not a quick fix, and so they really are stuck with that. And so what I've seen in these folks is that at first actually the COVID was kind of a sense of relief. It sort of took some of the other life pressures off them where they could give more energy to their addictive practice, their drinking or their drugging. but eventually it becomes a much heavier burden. And so, by the time they really commit, we want to have them to do certain things. We know the concept of AA that talks about people have to hit bottom. AA has such great concepts that everybody knows, and that's one of them. And this is where I get into this concept of talking about necessity as the mother of invention. The bottom, how bad does it have to be, has to do with the individual. For some people, bottom is not that low. I mean, it's not that far down. And enough discomfort gets their attention ongoing. For some people, it's hard to find that bottom. But the COVID experience has been more effective than most in getting people's attention because it doesn't go away. Beyond that, what we're going to is the question of how do you get a hold of it and keep a hold of it. So I'm going to follow what is the AA program's outline. The STEP program is brilliant psychology. They really borrowed from all the existing wisdom of the time, borrowed heavily from Carl Jung as well as many other behavioral psychological approaches, and developed a program that was very powerful. And the first step they have, the first part of the first step said, we admitted we were powerless. Now, what does powerless mean? Powerless does not mean there's no way in the world I can get better. That'd be a terrible thing to come to realize. But what it means is really kind of two things. One is it says, I can't simply decide I'm going to be better and through pure power of will get better. That's just not going to happen. That almost never happens. The second part of it says, I can't use a little bit and stay with that. That is always one is going to lead to another, lead to another, lead to another. That doesn't mean the first time I drink or the first time I drug I'm going to be out of control, but it means within a foreseeable future I'm going to slide all the way down to where I was. That's the thing that really discriminates addicts from other folks. There's been a number of very noble efforts at helping people to learn how to use alcohol in a controlled fashion who are alcoholic. And the long-term follow-up on those is they've all been abysmal failures. If you are one of those people, what it means is you've developed a really hardwired neural circuit that just connects so many different experiences to drinking. And once one begins, you cannot stop, or at least you cannot stop in a reasonable amount of time. And so we talk about starting. The first thing we start on that powerless thing is one has to do some writing. Okay, why writing? Because it's permanent. Ideas and perspective are elusive. The written word is something, particularly when it's in your handwriting by you, is something that has much more permanence and much more power. And so what you do when you talk about the powerlessness issue is you start to write about all the ways, all the illustrations of how you have been powerless. Those times that you have tried to quit and have been completely abstinent for periods of time, because one of the real diagnostic cues for people who are alcoholic or drug addicted is that they have periods of self-enforced abstinence. That's an effort to prove something. Well, people who don't have a problem don't have to prove something. So immediately by the fact that you're doing that, it says something pretty powerful about your relationship with the chemicals. And so, they have to look at those and say, wow, I've never really been able to hold it out. I had one friend that I go back decades with that I was concerned about many, many years ago in our early adult life. And he would go 2 years at a time. Phenomenally disciplined guy. Did all kinds of things that were incredibly disciplined. Did meditation and many other kind of very physically and psychologically demanding practices to try to get better, but never made it much beyond 2 years. And then what would happen is he'd begin to drink a little bit, and then eventually in 6 months or so you see him back where he was. And so it's to recognize those times, and it's also to recognize those times that I have decided I'm going to be moderate, and realize that eventually I'm never moderate. So those are the two really key principles in getting people really committed and sunk into this, is the idea that powerless, and so powerless means not by will power alone. And it means I can't be moderate. And the thing is that anybody who has tried to recover has done both of these in certain situations. So they have to be their own biggest challenger on this of really getting that clear. Okay? The second thing that we look at in terms of really getting that commitment and getting really sunk into a commitment to change is what they say is, and our lives became unmanageable. Okay? our lives become unmanageable. What does that mean? The word I come up with is damaged. Basically, I screwed up my life. One way or another, I've done damage, significant damage to my life, okay? So I'm going to put the word damage out here. Done damage in my life, okay? And the way to do that is to go through different aspects of myself and who I am. First thing we go to is the first kind of damage we talk about is psychological, meaning I become depressed, I have a really irritable attitude towards life, because so often people use addictions to sort of soften their relationship with the world and experience more positive emotions as they deal with the world. However, ongoing use generally winds up with people feeling very cynical and resentful towards the world. So there needs to be a look at, okay, what's happened to me? What's happened to my perspective on the world? What's happened to my mood? What's happened to my outlook on life? The next one we look at is physical. And physical can be anything from at the front end for somebody who is relatively young. That's things like fatigue, irritability, hangovers, low motivation, that sort of thing. They just don't feel very good because they're putting the chemical in their body a lot. As people get older, then you get real physical damage. You get brain damage, you get damage to your liver, you get damage to your skin, your whole body kind of falls apart. Alcohol is essentially a toxin. If you put enough of a poison in your body, basically it just completely destroys it. So these are pretty dramatic things, okay? We get into other ones, which is things like marital is a big factor, how it impacts one's marriage. As we talked about before, marriage is the most intimate community in which we live. It requires an incredible finesse and interaction. And to recognize what chemicals do to this sort of thing is really critical to one's well-being. What the practicing addict believes is that the problem is not that I have a problem with alcohol, the problem is that my wife is a bitch. And that has to change. The person has to realize their own contribution to that. So we have psychological, physical, marital, we'll say, family. Family meaning if you are a parent, what has that done to your relationship with your children? What's it doing to your relationship with your family of origin? And there are plenty of cues to this, although the practicing addict is likely to be blind to that stuff. Then we have financial, meaning either I'm not paying adequate attention to making money, or I'm not managing money well, or one way or another I'm creating problems. I may also have done harm. I may have wrecked my car. I may have totaled my car and done damage in that way. By the way, when we go back to the physical, that certainly can be one of the things as well. The old friend I was talking about had a very serious injury to his leg in a really bad car wreck that he'd lived with the rest of his life. So physical can come in all kinds of forms. Financial being either not making money or managing it well. Certainly career is a big one. What we see happening in employment situations and all kinds of different business situations is that initially these kind of problems tend to be ignored or sort of brushed aside, and the person, if anything, is sort of what they call enabled, which is sort of helping them along and making excuses for them. Often by the time an employer intervenes, it's really kind of at the 11th hour. Many years ago, they developed a thing called employee assistance programs, which look to make interventions more quickly, and that works to some extent. A lot of the time we see the same old practice of waiting till the last minute. But the career thing is a very big factor. And we see in professions things like law, medicine, psychology, and so on. Way back when I was first working with addictions decades ago, there wasn't much in place to really capture this, but now there are clear programs within all these professions that the licensure board will become involved if a person's addictive practices make them a threat to the quality of care of their patients, or some other way really outside the bounds of reasonable moral conduct. And then we get the issue of spiritual. And this can mean a lot of things to different people. One of the things that AA does a nice job of is they have an overriding spiritual principle. However, they don't really specifically define what that is. They don't require that people believe any particular thing, but just that life has greater meaning than just the immediate. That life unfolds in meaningful ways, and that we lose connection to the purpose of our lives when we get immersed in an addiction. All of this stuff works better when people, one, get in counseling, two, go to AA. Okay? This is really, really critical stuff at this point in time, because if you have someone who you love, or you are someone who is waking up to this, do not go with that decision that says, oh, I get it. I'm going to stop doing that. I've got it. I get it now. I understand it. That never, ever, ever works. And so the folks I'm working with, even with COVID going on, they're all going to AA. The initial orientation is going 90 meetings in 90 days. So they're doing a lot of mask wearing, and some of the meetings are actually outside as well. And that stuff is paying off real well for them. So there has to be this immersion into the experience, because otherwise what we know happens is that, like I said, is once you have been abstinent for a while, forces come to work in you. Okay? One of them is there's this thing called glorified recall. And what that means is the further I get from the events that led me to stop using, the more dim those become, and the more the positive and pleasant experiences become much more glorified and positive in their nature. You know, you remember much more what it felt like after the second drink instead of what it felt like the next morning. You know, you remember the warm, fun times you had with friends rather than the damage you've done to the people who you love. And so the only way to protect against that thing that goes on in everybody, and also you have then, as time goes by, you have the craving becomes more and more. You become more and more desperate for it, and then you justify it by this kind of memory, and then you do again. So it's really critical. If you or someone you love has this kind of problem, then you want to really, one, plug in to help. Like I said, this is a time-limited window, okay? Eventually, COVID is going to be over, okay? Even if you go through a divorce, eventually you're going to heal from that divorce. One way or another, the pressure, the immediate hard pressure to make that change is going to diminish over time, and therefore you have to take action right away. So that's our start on the subject of what to do with addictions recovery in COVID times. And again, you can go to the description below to look for the book about addictions, diseases of isolation, Heal Addictions, Restore Community, as well as the other ebook of mental health issues, loss of peace and joy within self. And make sure to sanitize and subscribe, and look forward to talking with you next time.